It's Atlanta's number one hip hop station, Hot 1079 at home for the Ricky Smiley Morning Show. Of course, you know it's your boy B High, Radio Shouty, man, stepping in the building. I got a hip hop mogul in this thing with me, Julia Beverly. What's going on with it, sis?
What's up?
Feeling good, feeling great as usual. I mean, can we take it straight from the top? For those that don't know, Ozone Magazine.
Yeah.
What was your part in
I
it?
am the founder, editor, publisher of Ozone Magazine. We had a great run. We did monthly for 8 years. Ozone was the premier Southern rap magazine.
That's right.
And now I'm working on a new project. Well, I've just released my first book. And it's kind of an extension of what I was doing with Ozone. It's kind of I was able to incorporate a lot of the things I learned through my adventures with Ozone.
Exactly. Sweet Jones, Pimp C's Trill life story. Tell me about it. What made you decide to make the book?
It was, I've gotten to meet a lot of artists through what I was doing with the magazine, got to hang out with a lot of people. And Pimp was, one of the coolest, just most interesting people that you'd ever be around, because it was always just something happening with him. It was never like a boring, never a boring time with Pimp C. So when he passed, I just felt like a lot of people didn't really know his story, and he had been so influential. And me personally, I was kind of curious because there was a lot of rumors, and you'd hear things, and you're like, why did he go to jail? The whole Free Pimp C movement, like there was a lot of mythology around Pimp C. So I wanted to actually do the research and find out what was the real story. And it was just an idea that I had. And when I reached out to his mom, who was actually his manager, they were extremely close. And the first time we sat down and talked about it, she just was immediately on board. And I didn't know that he had actually spoken very highly of me to her. And so she was immediately like, of course, this is what he would have wanted. Let's do this. And then talking with her, I mean, she was like a writer's dream, because she remembered everything.
Yeah.
She kept everything. So she's digging through and, finding paperwork and pictures from 20, 25 years ago. So she was the key, to putting together his life story. Not only him as an artist, because she was actually UGK's manager, but also him as a person, and, kind of giving a lot of insight into what made him develop these different characters that he had, and what made him become a rapper. And I found it to be really fascinating, him as a person and as an artist.
What were some of the things that Mama West told you that kind of surprised you that you didn't know about Pimp already?
I learned a lot. I mean, he one of the things that he was actually very sickly as a child. Like he had struggled with a lot of things. He was legally blind. He was Port Arthur is a very polluted community. You have all these chemical facilities in the area and whatnot. And so because of those factors, he spent all his childhood basically inside, just listening to music. So his mom talked about how initially she thought like something was wrong with him, because all he would do was just listen to the same song over and over and over again. But of course, as an adult, that was his strength, as a producer and as a musician, that he was such a perfectionist that he would just repetitively, listen to music over and over again. His mom talked about his mental health issues. He had severe depression, and he was diagnosed bipolar. And so one of the things that I found really fascinating was how she talked about how he was able to use the music to kind of cope with these things that he struggled with. And, throughout history, you see that with a lot of artists, that was part of what made them great, was that they had these, internal conflicts and things that they were struggling with. And so you kind of can't have one without the other. And so that was part of what made him a really fascinating musician, I think. And so talking about I'm always fascinated with people that are, complex, and people that have contradictions. And of course he embodied a lot of contradictions. I think people in general tend to have contradictions in their life. I mean, you can take anybody's life and probably find things that don't necessarily sync up. So you have somebody like Pimp C, who's, he's representing this pimp lifestyle, and he's has a certain image. He's hanging out with pimps and stuff, but at the same time, like he's he has kids, and he's married, and he loves his mom, and he loves God. He talks about spirituality a lot throughout his music. So just kind of exploring those contradictions. That's why I found him to be a fascinating subject to write about.
How was it getting the interviews for the book, trying to dig up all of that information from other various artists and people that were significant to Pimp?
I mean, obviously, through Ozone, I had met a lot of people, and I had spent a lot of time with Pimp as well. We were close in the years prior to him passing, and so those relationships that I had already built, obviously, that made it a lot easier for me to, there were people who talked to me and said, I would never have talked to anyone else about this, but I know you were really there, and so I'm gonna give you the real story. And aside from the artist, his mom really was the key, because a lot of people would be hesitant to talk to me, and then they would talk to her and say, "Oh, she told me it was good, so let's talk." So, in total, I interviewed about 250 people, which
Ooh.
I did a lot of research.
Exactly.
I left no stone unturned, definitely.
That's right.
And what I found was that I did talk with a lot of the Snoop Dogg's, the Too Shorts, the Scarfaces, a lot of the artists who were close to Pimp. They were helpful, but the people that were kind of behind the scenes, I was able to get a lot of information from his assistant, his DJ, his bodyguard, people that were around him all the time that really gave me insight into who he was as a person. And I wanted to just paint the full picture, not just one side.
Exactly. Getting that insight from people that were around him. Being that you were around him also, what were some of the things that the assistant or the bodyguard would tell you that kind of shocked you?
I mean, it wasn't a lot that shocked me per se, because he was unpredictable. He had a lot of there was one story DJ Bird told. DJ Bird was originally he was the third member of UGK, but he also was C's bodyguard. And so he talked about when C wanted to buy the Benz for the Big Pimpin' video, and C had a friend who was a major drug dealer in Nashville, and he said, "Hey, I'll just give you the money." And so he had Bird drive up there and drive back with like $80,000 cash, and he was like panicking because he's thinking he's gonna get pulled over. And he had a lot of like interesting stories that you might not have heard about, kind of behind the scenes. And I mean, a lot of people have heard, Pimp didn't want to do Big Pimpin'. Pimp had an altercation with Master P. Then so I wasn't sure how much truth there was to all these things that you've heard, and so the book will pretty much clear up anything you want to know about Pimp C.
We were just talking to Jazzy Faye the other day, and he was telling the story about him not wanting to do Big Pimpin', and he was saying that Pimp didn't want to do it, but then after that song dropped, he was ecstatic about the success of the song.
Right.
What else? What other perspectives did you get on that?
Well, interesting side note, there's a funny story about Jazzy Faye and Pimp C. Actually, how they met was that they were did he tell you this?
Yeah.
Yeah, they were involved with the same woman. And so that's a funny story how they originally, that's how they started working together. At first they got in a fight or whatever, and ended up becoming good friends. But it was Pimp felt like he didn't want to sell out and become a pop star and use Jay-Z to become this big symbol of whatever without he wanted to earn respect on his own terms and with his own music. So he didn't like the beat. And if we're being honest, I mean, Big Pimpin', I don't never really like the song that much. You know what I mean? Like the Pimp had a great verse.
Yeah, he did.
But and it worked for a radio record, But that honestly, like a lot of the UGK radio records, if we're being honest, are probably like the weaker songs in their catalog. But they're radio records, so they do what they're supposed to do. Right. But the real UGK fans are probably fans of the songs that were not on the radio. So Pimp was just he just had a lot of principles, and once he had made his mind up about something, he wasn't gonna change his mind. But he also one of the interesting things about Big Pimpin' was that they didn't get publishing off the record. So that was a big that was a big mistake. But actually, Jay-Z is still being sued over Big Pimpin'. That's still ongoing. The song that was sampled for the track, I guess, was not cleared. So there's still a court case ongoing. So because UGK didn't get publishing, they were able to get themselves out of the lawsuit. So I guess that was a silver lining for them. But the whole story of Big Pimpin' is quite entertaining. That was recorded right here at Patchwork in Atlanta. And Pimp finally, he said that the person who actually talked him into it was an attorney who worked with the New Black Panther Party out of Washington D.C. was the final person to talk him into it, and he said, "Hey, you can use this song to send a message to Jive because they're not going to be able to stop it even if they wanted to." And at that time, he was pretty much at war with Jive, felt like they owed him money, owed him royalties, so that's why he said, no record till Whitey pays. And I'm not offended by the use of the term whitey. Neither was Barry. I asked Barry Weiss of Jive Records if he was offended. He said, "No, it's just business. I don't
what was Barry saying when you talked to him about the book?"
Barry was actually a very interesting interview. I actually used one of his quotes on the back cover. He said Pimp C was brilliant, but he was mad. He was a madman, and he really didn't give a That's what was so endearing and refreshing about him and what made him such a special person. He had a rough exterior, but underneath it all, he had a big heart and was really just a good person who was, as many artists are, just frustrated trying to get his voice heard. So I thought that was a great quote because I think he really understood, like he said, Pimp was just somebody who wanted to get his voice across.
Exactly.
And at the time, he didn't feel like he was being respected in New York on the East Coast. He didn't feel like he was being heard, and so that was his way of getting his message across sometimes.
Yeah. During the time that Pimp was in jail, I know you had a lot of communication with him. What was that communication like? And I mean, what was going through Pimp's mind when he realized that he was doing all this time when he was almost in his prime at the time going in?
He really was. I mean, that was another interesting aspect of the book, was just talking about how did he end up, in prison for 4 years over a really minor incident, and there were a lot of mistakes he made, but it's also part of the Texas prison system. I mean, that what happened to Pimp likely would not have happened anywhere else in the country, and I talk about that in the book. But I actually met him while he was in prison, and so I think I saw a different. He was very calm and very, he was very centered and very focused and sober, and he just wanted to get out and make money and very focused on what his goals were for the future and things like that. So it was very interesting meeting him while he was incarcerated. We did a section in Ozone called Prison Diaries, which was basically, people who were incarcerated would write in and we would just print their letters. So we had done it with, I think, C Murder. The first time we ran the Pimp C letter, like, we just got so much, response off of it, and he started getting fan mail from all over the world from, people who had seen him in the magazine and things like that. So it was a good way for him, I think, to keep in touch with his audience. It was a good way for us to, keep our readers with some fresh new material and things like that. So Pimp did a lot of, he contributed a lot to Ozone. He was like a monthly contributor almost, and it was always something entertaining with him. So,
what do you think it was about Pimp that caused everybody that came in contact with him to love him so much?
Well, one of the things Bun said in the interview was just that Pimp was so passionate about everything, so people cared because he cared, and even if you didn't necessarily agree with his opinion, like I know he came on Hot 107 and had a very controversial interview, but even if you didn't necessarily agree with everything he said, he said it with so much conviction, like you had to respect it. That was his opinion. Opinions are like booty holes.
Everybody
got one. So you had to respect his opinion. So I think just because he spoke with so much conviction, and he was a man of principle. He said, this is what I believe, and that's nobody's going to change my mind. So I can always respect the person who can stand by their opinion and not be political or be tactful or be trying to keep people happy. It's just, this is my opinion. I'm sticking to it. So.
Being a man of principle, UGK, they made a lot of conscious music also. Did he speak to why they made it a point to make sure they actually said something in the songs that they put out versus just putting out some regular, just country crazy music and actually having some substance behind the music?
I mean, that was always something Pip spoke very passionately about, and he, even if you go back to interviews he did in like 1999, which now it's 2015, so 16 years ago, he was doing interviews saying, I'm tired of people talking about their cars, their jewelry, their chains, hoes, like we need to have some substance in the music. And I mean, if you look at today, it's even worse. I mean, nobody, there's very little substance in the music that we're hearing, or maybe it's gotten harder to find because it's so many people speaking on the same tired topic. So the things that Pimp spoke on are still relevant today. And I think for Pimp, he always, I don't know if I'd say conscious, but he always had that, they always had that balance. And he had vulnerability in his music. Like, he would talk about things that maybe some rappers would be too prideful to talk about or not want to open up and be vulnerable on a record. So Pimp always, they always definitely had that balance. And I think it's kind of funny that they're always, to the mainstream, they're kind of categorized as like, gangster rap, or, they talk about drugs or whatever. But if you actually listen to what is being said, there's always a flip side to it. And that was one of the strengths of UGK. And, Pimp spoke on that in the Hot 107 interview, where he said, hey, if you're going to talk about drugs, you got to talk about the other side. I mean, what happens when you end up in prison? What happens then to your family and things like that? So it's important to have that balance and not just glorify it not just glorify the money and the the jewelry and all that.
When Bun B found out that you were doing the book, what did he have to say about it?
Bun was actually the first person that I have reached out to see his opinion, and he told me that I should do it and be honest with it, and that's what I took away from the conversation. He said, basically, you may not be able to please everybody. Some people might not be happy with you, but you're gonna have to tell a story, and I don't know if he's happy with it. I'm not sure. I don't know, but I know that he I saw him the other day at the Jeezy show, and he asked how the book had been going and whatnot. So I'm not sure what his opinion is on the finished product, but I know that he knows the relationship I had with Pimp, and he respects me as a journalist. I would venture to say, I don't want to put words in anybody's mouth, but yeah, Bun was definitely somebody I consulted with very early in the project, and we did some interviews as well, and he gave me a lot of great background info on the early UGK that I wouldn't have known otherwise.
I mean, do you mind to elaborate on that, some of that early UGK information?
I just think it was really interesting how the group came together in high school. I mean, this was back in 91, 1990, 1991. So at the time, it's not like it is now where everybody wants to be a rapper. At the time, it wasn't viewed as an actual career. It wasn't viewed as something that could actually make money. So they had a lot of resistance from their, Bun's mom wasn't supportive of his rap endeavors. Pimp's stepfather was actually the first person that really kind of believed in them and said, I think that you should do this, and really encouraged them on the music side. But outside of that, they just had a lot of resistance from, their parents and their, other people in the community who didn't feel like this was something they really should be spending their time on. Other people saw better paths for them. You should pursue this path. You should go to college. You should play football, whatever. And so just understanding the dedication that Pimp C had, even at that age, he was just determined, I'm going to make a record. He actually dropped out of high school just a couple months before he was set to graduate, just because he was so determined. Like, they were already had a record deal in place. They were already, selling units. So he just decided to go that route with it. But their whole development was very interesting to me. And they didn't, some people know this, but Bun and Pimp didn't get along at all when they first met. They had, they kind of, they thought each other was kind of full of it, and then when they finally had a conversation, they realized that they had the love of the music was really what brought them together.
How did Pimp feel about Bun holding him down while he was locked down? Because, I mean, Bun B was on a mission. I mean, he went on everybody's song and he screamed "Free Pimp C" to the top of his lungs from the top of his lungs from years. How did Pimp feel about him holding him down like that?
That's another interesting part of the book because it's a complicated, they had a very complicated relationship. So I think a lot of people felt that Bun was upset with Pimp for going to prison because he made mistakes. I mean, there were things he was supposed to be handling that he didn't handle. It put the group in a bad position when they could have been, riding high off the big pimping. So they had issues, while Pimp was away, and so they didn't have a lot of communication, during that time. But at the same time, Bun was, as you said, he was on, I think that somebody had done like a countdown of like 40 features he did in 1 year, and every song he's shouting out "Free Pimp C." So he definitely did his part to keep the name alive, to keep the UGK brand alive. And obviously when Pimp came home, they had the world waiting for them to drop an album. So, he definitely held it down on the UGK side.
How did Pimp feel when he came home?
How did he feel?
Yeah, coming out of jail, knowing that it was about to go down, they had the whole world waiting on him when he came out.
I mean, I'm sure he felt great. The way that his mom described it was that when they went to pick him up from the prison, and they turned up the radio and they were saying, "Oh, Pimp C is free," that he was just kind of stunned that it was news. Like he didn't really realize initially how big he had become while he was away. Because prior to him going to prison, I mean, they had a fan base and stuff, but he wasn't at the level of notoriety that he was when he came home. So, she talked about them stopping even at like a McDonald's or something after he got out of prison and just being mobbed with people, and he just wasn't prepared for he was just surprised at the attention. He wasn't expecting it. So that was interesting also.
What obstacles did you face creating this book? Did you get any resistance from anybody while you were trying to get busy?
Oh yeah, I mean it wouldn't be right if there wasn't obstacles. There were some people who tried to stop me from putting out this book, so shout out to them. I really appreciate it.
Ooh.
Um, but I didn't get much support. Initially, I thought, okay, I'm gonna write a book. I need an agent. I need a publisher.
Yeah.
I contacted countless agents, countless publishers. These people don't know who Pimp C is. They have no understanding. So that was a little discouraging at first, and over time I realized, I'll just do it myself. That's what Pimp would have done, because there's so many avenues now. It's a lot like music. You have so many avenues to get content to the people directly. So if you set it up the right way, and obviously I learned a lot doing Ozone, so I've kind of been able to apply some of those same, the marketing techniques, or just get out there and hustle, do what you have to do. So I ended up publishing it myself. It really came. I'm really happy with how it came together.
Yeah.
But there were a lot of obstacles, and it would take too long to even go into all of them. I try not to dwell on that too much, but I really believe that I was supposed to write this book, and I believe in God.
That's right.
And I said it in the acknowledgments. I said God is the publisher, because as I was writing it, I didn't know how it was going to come out. This is a 700-page book with 150 pages of pictures. So it's not cheap to print this. I promise you that.
Exactly.
So I didn't know how this ultimately was going to come to be, but I was told, write the book and the money will come.
Exactly.
And it did. So
Definitely.
I don't know what else. I don't know what else to say. But if you believe in something and you pursue it, like, it'll work out. It always has. So I'm real happy with how it came together. And the company is called Shreveport Ave Publishing, which is his mother's house. Yeah, his mother passed right after our last interview. Like, literally, she had just. That's how I know it was meant to be, because the last interview we did, like, she gave me all this material that we had been talking about. Here's everything. Scan this, use this. And I left, and 2 months later got a call she was in the hospital. And
how did that affect you when you found that out?
Oh, it was a shocker, because she the last time I saw her, she was on stage with 2 Chainz, like waving at the crowd and taking pictures with people. I mean, she was, when people say, I think when I say his mother, they're thinking of, like, old lady in bed or whatever. That was not his mother at all. Like, she was at every show in Houston, Pimp's son, Corey, he's a rapper. She was like managing him. She was like the coolest, 60-something woman you'd ever meet. And she was so, vibrant and everything. So it definitely was a shocker when I got that call, because I came, as soon as I got the call that afternoon, I booked the flight, flew out there the next day. By the time I got there, she was already, basically in a coma. And she passed 48 hours later. So, yeah, I miss Mama West. She was just sitting with her. Like, I would go to her house and just sit there for like the whole day. She would just cook and tell me stories.
Yeah.
Like, that was basically the research, process for the book. And she had some great stories.
Yeah.
She got some great Pimp C stories, so.
What was Pimp's family life like with Lil Corey and everybody else?
I mean, his sons were older, and then he had a daughter with. By all accounts, I mean, he was a good father. Everybody spoke highly of him. He wasn't the. You always hear about rappers, being deadbeats or whatever, but that wasn't Pimp at all. He was definitely a very supportive father, and loved his mom, and he was a good guy, and that's another thing that people gravitated towards. He wasn't just a good rapper, but he was a good guy.
Can we expect a screenplay from that book? Because we need the movie to that.
Yeah, I mean, that's the number one question. I can't answer that, because I'm not a movie producer. I'm kind of there's so many bad biopics. Like, I don't want to do it and it'd be like a Lifetime. Like, when what was it, the Aaliyah movie they did where everybody had they said Macklemore in the main coat was gonna play Pimp C. All the memes and stuff. Yeah, I would love to see it as a movie, but I don't know how. I don't know if it could be done right. It'd have to be done. It'd have to be like a multi-part. I don't think you could do it in 90 minutes. I think it'd have to be maybe it'd be a series or something. But you'd have to find. It would be hard to find somebody to play Pimp C. That'd be the number one thing. You need some great actors.
Yeah.
And Mama West, his mom. I don't know who could play Mama West. You have to find a real gangster, 60-something old lady to play Mama West, but you know, it could happen. Who knows?
Mm-hmm. What is the main point? Well, what are the main points that you want people to take from the book?
Well, I had right before I put it out, I had a couple people read it just to give me some feedback, and a variety of people because I wanted to know how it came across to different people. And one person I had read it, he's a college professor, doesn't listen to rap, never heard of Pimp C before. And what he told me was that it shattered his stereotypes of rappers or everything that he would think about rappers. That it made him look at him as a person and kind of humanized him and his story. So I thought that was key because I did want it to be, I wanted it to be something that if you're a Pimp C fan, like this is like people say this is like their Bible. Like I have had people, you know, Instagram me of like the book along with their Bible that they're carrying everywhere with them. So I think that's cool. But even if you're not a Pimp C fan or you haven't been exposed to the music, I just think it's a great story. 'Cause it's really about Pimp and his mom.
That's right.
At the end of the day, the story is about family, and you know they kind of took over the world together. So I just thought it was a cool story, and then the ups and downs of his life. I think there's a lot to be learned about the music industry, about the prison system. You know, when you understand, and of course I'm a white woman, so my perspective is different, but I do understand how the system is set up for black men. It's not designed for you. It's designed for you to fail. So if you don't understand it, you're definitely gonna fail. You know what I mean? So I think if Pimp had understood certain things, then he might not have ended up in the situation he was in. So, you know, maybe there's lessons to be learned that people can take away.
That you care to point out from the book that people can learn from as we speak?
Well, we kind of touched on it. I mean, definitely, you know, him going to prison was a low. Although he reflected on it later. He said, "I think the reason I went to prison is because it saved me from dying." You know, so it was a good. He came to view it as kind of a blessing in disguise. And you know, we talked about his mental health struggles. You know, his mom said he was depressed like a large majority of the time, and the music was just his way of coping with it. So, you know, he had a lot of things that he struggled with, but he was able to overcome and make something positive out of it. So I think that's a story anybody can relate to.
Now, what about Pimp C's death? Because a lot of people, they still don't quite want to believe how he passed or what was going on with that. I mean, were you able to delve into that and figure out what was going on when he passed?
Yeah, there's well, his mom believes he was murdered, and she basically breaks down the reasons why she believes that. I couldn't really. There's some circumstantial evidence that might make you think that, but as far as like physical evidence, I had some other people review the autopsy report and things like that, and they didn't really come to a solid conclusion as far as, you know, any foul play or things like that. But a lot of people have heard that he died of a codeine overdose, which is not true at all. That was actually, you know, the day he passed or the day that the results of the tests and whatnot were not announced, the coroner said, you know, he did not overdose. And then you had all these newspapers that said that he did overdose. So that was just irresponsible media that came up with that story. But the official story was that he had sleep apnea, which is a condition which can make it hard for you to basically stop breathing in your sleep. And the story was that he took some codeine, which prevented his body from waking up the way that it normally would. So it feasibly could have happened that way. But there are some alternate theories, which I kind of explore in the book. His mom thinks he was poisoned, and there was someone with him when he passed who was a very shady, strange character. So there was actually a person of interest, according to his mother, that she believed had something to do with his death. So I wasn't able to really definitively come to a conclusion, but I've laid out all the facts, and people can kind of decide for themselves. And that's an interesting story as well. So
those shady characters in the industry.
Yeah.
How was Pimp able to navigate through the industry with all of that around him at all times, leading all the way up until his death?
I want to be honest. I think he didn't do a good job of keeping. I don't know if he didn't have a good, what's the word? You know, a good radar for people. Because I'm big on like people's vibes. Like if I don't like how you come across, you're not gonna be around me.
That's right.
And you know, his mom was very like, she talked about how, you know, she had met this guy and she really didn't want him around because she just caught a funny feeling from him. But Pimp had a lot of people. He had some former managers who, you know, he had a fake accountant that's, you know, got him for 6 figures. He had a lot of people that really didn't do right by him. So I don't know if he just was too trusting in people, or I don't know what it was, but I think that was a big part of the reason why he's not here anymore is not having the right people around him.
After doing all of that research, what are your thoughts on the industry right now as it is?
My thoughts on the industry? I mean, like I said, some of the things pretty much everything he said is still valid. He said if we don't start putting substance in the music, it's going to go somewhere else, and that's what happened. And one thing Pimp always said, he was very humble about his musical abilities. He was, there was one interview where he said, I think I'm a decent producer. I think I'm a decent rapper, but I have something to say, and that's what's important. So I think that's the problem, is we don't have enough. And it kind of happens, I think, with any trend or anything in entertainment, where the first people to get into it are into it because they love it, and that's the only reason, because there's no money in it. So that's where the UGKs, the world came in. They got into it because they loved the music. And then after they started to achieve success, and you have all these music videos with the rented cars, and it just looks like they're just having the time of their life, and it's all fun and money and girls everywhere, then you have a lot of other people that decide to get into it for other reasons, for the wrong reasons, and then it becomes hard to differentiate between, who's doing it for who's doing it for the love of the art, and who's doing it for the love of the money. So it's definitely, it's definitely oversaturated. I'll say that. There's a quote from Bun on the back of the book which says, "Hip hop without Pimp C is boring."
Damn right.
I thought was a great quote, because it's kind of, we had a little entertainment. We had the Meek and Drake, going back and forth. So,
and also, you only have a few artists who can't be duplicated: Snoop Dogg, Pimp C, Tupac, Biggie, whose flavor and style is just distinct. When they come on that mic, that's Pimp C,
right?
And when somebody's trying to sound like Pimp C too.
I talk about this a lot, because it's not enough to be. You could be a great rapper, but are you a
Do you have that delivery?
Are you a star?
Yeah.
And Pimp was a star.
That's right.
You have some people who when they walk in, like, to me, a superstar is somebody who, they walk in the room and there's all eyes on them. Like they're the center of attention. That was Pimp. That's a Lil Wayne, a Rick Ross, is somebody who has that. They have that look. And we have some good rappers, but like, do we have stars that are that fill that image? And there's some, but it's not,
There ain't no Pimp C.
No Pimp C's, no.
I can definitely dig that. With Julia, do you have any other things you want to get off your chest?
I think we said it all, man. The book you can pick up on Amazon. That's the best place to get it. It'll be in retail stores as well soon, but Amazon is the best place to pick it up. You can follow me on my social media, is all Julia Beverly. We also have Instagram and Twitter for the book, which is at Pimp C Book. Post a lot of interesting Pimp C related, UGK related content on there. Pimp's son is rapping now. Shout out to Corey. Yeah. Underground Kids, you can look them up. UG Kids with a Z, or Pimp Chad Jr. Shout out to the whole, the UGK posse and the family, and R.I.P. Mama West, R.I.P. Pimp C.
I know that's right. This book right here.
Now you got to read that. I want to know what you think.
Now I'm about to read this whole thing tonight. It's probably going to be about a 48-hour read, though, as thick as it is, but I'm definitely reading this. Make sure you get it. Be High Radio Shout at Julia Beverly. It's Hot 107.9. Let's go.